Warning: this episode is explicit and detailed in the descriptions of attempted suicide, self-harm, rape, and sexual assault. It is not appropriate for children, and extreme discretion is advised in keeping the listening audience restricted to only appropriately aged and emotionally capable persons. If you're activated and having thoughts of suicide and need immediate help, call the National Suicide Prevention Hotline at 988. Or if you're activated and need immediate help regarding a past rape or sexual assault, call the National Sexual Assault Telephone Hotline at 1-800-656-4673.
It's a really good moment for three of us to come together. I miss the two of you so deeply. Seeing you in Napa recently, Caroline, and then Dave, to just a few minutes to catch up with you. It's been really awesome.
California's been calling me for a really long time. And my daughter even commented, she's like, your skin looks better. Your hair looks better. Your demeanor, everything about you feels comfortable and comforted in California. And I was like, ooh, I like that.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Sexual Assault Survivor Stories, the SAS podcast. I'm glad you're here. You've just tuned into one of the most important podcasts that you may ever listen to, because the purpose of this podcast is to provide a safe space for victims and survivors of rape and sexual assault to share their stories and connect with others who've been through similar experiences. However, there are other important aspects to this podcast: community, education, and support. I believe that sharing our stories is one of the most important steps to healing, and my hope is that the SAS podcast will help victims and survivors feel less alone and more empowered. And my ultimate goal is to provide all of my listeners with insights, resources, and a supportive space where empathy, compassion, and understanding thrive. My commitment is to being there for all my listeners. I'm your host, Dave Markel, coming to you from the Podvlog studio in St. George, Utah, and I'm here each week talking to victims and survivors or interviewing experts and professionals in order to not only gain insights and information to help us on our healing path, but also to provide an education on being trauma-informed, working to help bring justice to victims and survivors of rape and sexual assault. Whether you're aware of it or not, we all know someone whose life has been impacted by rape or sexual assault. So I encourage everyone to listen to this podcast. Whatever your experience is with rape or sexual assault, you are not alone, and we are all here for each other. Thank you again for being here. Hey everyone, thanks for joining me this week for another episode of Sexual Assault Survivor Stories, the SAS podcast. This is episode 91, and it's not only my regular monthly episode with Carolyn Markel, but we're joined this week with a return guest. From episodes 49 and 50, Bailie is back, and she brings us not only an update on what's new in her life, but also some unique, helpful, and timely information on her life, both personally and professionally. Combine all that with Carolyn's amazing insights and information, and you have an episode that you won't want to miss, and that you'll want to share with everyone you know. I'm excited for you to hear this, so let's get to it, and I'll catch you on the other side. Here's Carolyn and Bailie. Carolyn and Coach Bailie, thank you so much for being here. This is an epic episode. I get to have dual guests from separate episodes. Both of you are such a big influence on this podcast, and having you on an episode where you're both together is just a thrill. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, very, very welcome. Thank you. It's a really good moment for three of us to come together. I miss the two of you so deeply. Seeing you in Napa recently, Caroline, and then Dave, to just a few minutes to catch up with you. It's been really awesome.
Well, my picture that you look to in your episode is still here. The reason that's there is San Francisco is one of my most favorite cities in the whole wide world, and I love watercolors. So I walked into a shop while I was visiting there once and saw both these paintings, and I've got the Golden Gate. Bailie used it to reference a situation in her life in our first episode, and it led to some unbelievable disclosure information that I know has helped people. Thank you again. I need to come to Napa. I really want to come see you, and I want to see the area, and I want to just spend some time with you showing me everything that you can show me about Napa and your work. I love it.
Yeah, I do too. It's just such a blessing. I even came home and I made a Zillow account so I could just start popping in places. California's been calling me for a really long time. And my daughter even commented, she's like, your skin looks better, your hair looks better, your demeanor, everything about you feels comfortable and comforted in California. And I was like, ooh, I like that.
And we are in the middle of Pride Month. Well, not in the middle. We're almost closing in on the end.
Pride never ends. In June, maybe there's a little bit more celebration, but Pride is something to be celebrated year round. That's really what I'm so grateful for right now in this moment, because we've done an amazing thing this year with Napa Pride 2024. The Queer Leaders Coalition, Napa Pride, LGBTQ Connection, a lot of local agencies, restaurants, bars, wineries, other nonprofits. The way that people are showing up right now for the community is the first time in 17 years of being in Napa Valley where I feel finally like I'm at home, like I can relax. The conditions exist for me to be who I am and to come out as who I am. And it's really cool to do that and be held by people like you, like outside of Napa that I get to connect with. Then also held by people within the community, being able to make connections and do work together. There's 36 people that came together in the beginning of March to conceptualize what we wanted to create in Napa. We created 5 years worth of events, but we landed on 2. With what we were able to do, it was a tea dance and a swag and wag pride pet walk that was sponsored by one of the local hotels on Dawes. And it was amazing. I'm literally on a rainbow cloud right now.
I love it.
So much joy. Sorry, I know that's like long-winded, but
no,
really,
I wanted that. I was just going to say, Bailie, tell us what's going on. What's been happening? What came off? And then Carolyn got to come out there and be with you. Tell me about the time, Carolyn, that you guys spent together.
It was so much fun. My friend Julie, who travels with me, she's like, hey, if for the rest of my life, I can be the second person you call for any trips, that would be great. Because she's filled in as a second person for 3 different trips now. She is a CEO of one of the largest mental health community entities in Missouri and Kansas. So she's a powerhouse mental health advocate. And she's just a super cool chick who's really smart and can have fun as well. So I wasn't worried at all about bringing Julie around. Part of the selfish part of me was like, well, Julie's my friend and all, but I've been looking to have Bailie a conversation with her and but Julie was great to have. We had so much fun. It turned into darn near close to 3 hours of us chatting. And I gushed about Bailie before on my last podcast with you, Dave. Her energy, her intelligence, her way to take concepts that people who aren't familiar with them don't want to screw up. I'll err on the side that they don't want to screw up. And so they're hesitant, but they want to know. Bailie just brings it in a format that allows everybody to feel comfortable to learn and receive that information. I just want to introduce her to everybody. I'm like, okay, I got a list. You just tell me when I need to start making the calls. In my dream world, not in my dream world, in my reality, because I am making that come alive. Just so you know, Bailie, I want to hire you at Safe and Harm's Way when we have that amount of funding. I just want you to be a national voice and a national thought leader. I want you to walk in your confident, intelligent way into rooms where big decisions are made on a national level. I think that's the exposure you need when you're ready. I don't want to ever make anybody feel uncomfortable with the big dreams I have, but I also believe that if I share them out loud, then that makes them more come into reality on the timelines that people need. And in a way that says, I see what you're doing and how can I help? Those kinds of things. That comes from my dad. I am my dad's daughter. My dad, if he recognized things in people, he moved heaven and earth to make sure that they were put into positions that honored their time, their talent, their expertise, then helped them grow. It's part of my DNA, but it's also selfish for Safe and Harm's Way. So yeah, it was great. We sat and chatted and laughed a lot and learned a lot. We got to go to a party and eat good food and hang out for a while and meet a lot of people. And I walked away from it just on a really big natural high. How about you, Bailie?
Oh, yeah, that party. It was for Give Out Day. And so Give Out Day is a national campaign done by the Horizons Foundation, who funds a lot of national LGBTQ nonprofits across the country. And it's a campaign they've been doing for like 10 years. And our organization has done it every single year. And right before the start of Give Out Day 2024, the Horizons Foundation notified us that we were going to not be having that campaign moving forward, that they were ending it. And as an organization, we've relied on that a lot every single year. It's those funds that are not really attached to any grant. So we can kind of be really flexible with them and put them where the money is really needed. So to lose that revenue stream years moving forward, it's going to be a hit. And so I'm also learning about fund development in this new role. And I actually a new role. I don't know if you both know, but starting new fiscal year, July 1st, I'm stepping up to lead as director of LGBTQ Connection Napa. And I'll be doing co-leadership of the organization with my co-director, Celicia Aguilar in Sonoma County.
That's
yeah,
amazing.
So it's pretty cool.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. We got some new funding through really good partnership with Mentis, which is our local nonprofit that provides mental health services for youth and a lot of people. But we're specifically going in partnership to do some CBT therapy for LGBTQ and then also offer the same opportunities for their parents. And so we're talking about whole youth approach. We're hitting them with the one-on-one support in the wellness centers and the schools. We're providing the youth with the social activities and the fun stuff and the support groups when needed. And then clinical therapy in group setting, also one-on-one therapy, and then getting parents involved. I feel like we're going to be able to maybe change some lives in our community with this new partnership. So it's pretty cool. And with that, I'm hiring new people. We're going to have actually then more funding and other grants. We're doing a little bit of a remodel of the center right now so that we can have more robust activities at the center and really make it a hub for LGBTQ youth. I have a vision for like a countywide gender sexuality GSA network. So there's a lot of different things that I think are coming. I wouldn't be in this place. If I had jumped off the bridge, I wouldn't be here. You know, like looking back at that picture of the Golden Gate Bridge, it's funny that you reflected back to that when we started, because I saw that and I kind of went back to that moment of us very first talking for the first time. And, you know, I haven't really been leaning into that stuff too much in my survivorship. I'm in a different place, I think, where you saw me before. I think where both of you met me before. Both of us came together. I was in a different place, and it's really cool to be here now, to hear the words that are being said about me. And I'll be honest, we were at the garden and we had a wonderful meal there. I had an imposter syndrome flare up. It was almost a little breakdown, and I didn't call you, but I was kind of like, oh my gosh, like how can somebody that doesn't even know me see that in me or think about these things or want this for me? It's kind of weird. And then when you were talking about your dad and the values that your dad instilled in you, I'm here looking at pictures and I have a lot of photos of my dad, and I'm reflecting a lot about my family and my family's influence on me. And my dad had a really big influence on me too. And the way that I think I'm showing up in the community, he was always the person and still is the person that helps people, that would go out of his way to really support somebody that needed it. And he definitely instilled that in me. So it's kind of cool to see how my parents' values and some of the very positive and incredible things that they instilled in me are being exercised in my current work and me being who I am. And I get paid to do this, and I get paid to be like professionally gay. And I know I joke about that, but I don't know how long this wave is going to last. So I'm just writing it.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
And that whole reflection that you just gave is exactly why Caroline is so excited about the prospect of hiring you. I can see that. And it makes perfect sense to me, along with everything else I know that you've accomplished. And your progression, just since the time that you and I had our first episode together, is amazing. And it's why I wanted you back, because like you said, things are so different for you now than they were even then. But that episode made such an impact on me. Actually, the phone conversation that we had together before that episode, our very first conversation, it made such an indelible, deep impact on my soul, because I knew, right, this is somebody who really has an experience, but also a vision that everybody needs to know about. What Carolyn said makes perfect sense.
As you beautifully talk about, Bailie, in times of reflection, in people pleasing or not honoring myself, I wasn't even asking people to say my name right.
Mm-hmm.
I know when I first started telling my story, it was very powerful. And I had this boom of extra energy and really feeling smart and strong. And I still feel smart and strong. But the more I hunker down into healing on my journey, and the more, I probably should like hire a marching band and fireworks, the more happy I get in who I am and loving myself, the more there can be some really sad days of what the fuck, what did I tolerate? I had an energy session and it's rage, and I'm talking about it. I am livid. I sent a note yesterday. I said, I am all mother and light. We call ourselves the divine feminine energy. It's my high school girlfriend and our daughters. We're on this group text, and we all know and love each other, which is so fuel to me. And I said, I am like all motherly love right now. And I could easily also slit someone's throat. Like the amount of love that I'm carrying inside and the amount of rage at what I tolerated and what someone did to me is a duality that I'm living in. And I call that out now because as people heal, we're going to have these explosions of healing and influence and honoring ourselves. And then that's when the look back sneaks in of all the times we didn't. And that's hard. But I think if we don't talk that as a process, then people think they're doing it wrong. Or people are like, well, wait, I'm still here. Kinda. And better or different. So if we talk about these moments that actually when you get to a point of anger, you've developed inside yourself so much self-love that you're actually processing the anger, which is beautiful.
It's so necessary. It's part of one of the 11 points of commonality that all victims of rape and sexual assault feel and go through is that rage and anger. What I think of when I hear you say that, though, that, that you're so full of love, yet you could slit somebody's throat. There's this intention in the love that stops you from slitting somebody's throat because that anger and that rage is intentional. And we've used this word before. We've talked about this, Carolyn, is that word intentional. And I think there's some extreme power behind intentional rage. I just had an episode with a guy named Chris McGee, whose daughter was sexually assaulted by a cop in Pennsylvania. And he had the rage that you're talking about when at the sentencing for this guy's trial, he didn't get any jail time. And he's on this mission to change the law with his daughter, she's now 18, to make sure that law enforcement officials who sexually assault children are charged in such a way that it's a felony and there's mandatory jail or prison time. So that's intentional. What he's doing is so intentional. And I see what you're doing, Carolyn, with your Safe in Harm's Way, but also this whole corroboration with sexual assault survivor stories, with Bailie in Napa and all that she's doing makes so much sense to me in terms of what you're doing with that rage and that intention.
Can I add some? Think of a quote that I, pulled off of the interwebs this morning. And it's very appropriate. So it says, you're not healing to be able to handle trauma. You're used to trauma. You're healing to be able to handle joy. And I would add that you're healing to be able to handle, to handle the empathy and to handle the compassion. And, that's where I've actually, just part of my healing journey recently. And I know last time I was on, I was very reluctant to talk about the modalities that I was using. But I feel kind of confident talking about where I'm at right now, just with my mindfulness, meditation. And what really brought this on was sadly and tragically at LGBTQ Connection on March 8th of this year, Jose Luis Rodriguez, our program coordinator, was in a fatal car accident and passed away. And it shook. It shook me personally. It shook our team personally. We're still affected by it. We're lucky that we work in an organization that has held us and has let us grieve in a very appropriate way. We're all receiving help and healing. That incident rocked me in a way because I've never lost one of my own before. I've never lost a teammate before. I've never lost someone that I knew to be such a beautiful, amazing person. He was 29 years old and he was working and reaching very rural LGBTQ youth up in Calistoga and in areas that are more rural in Napa County. So that really got me to just start thinking about my own, you think about your own mortality and thinking about all the times that I've come really close to ending my own life. And what it means to survive and what it means to not, feel that way anymore, and what it means to carry on when someone that you deeply, deeply loved and saw so much potential in and wanted to be a part of their greatness just snuffed out way too soon.
Yeah. Let me express my sincere sorrow and empathy to you and that entire organization, to his family, to his loved ones, to his friends. Oh, I can hear it in your voice. I see it. It's really tough. And boy, I support you and I give you all the empathy and condolences that I possibly can. I wish I could just envelop you in my arms.
No, I feel it. We've felt it all from the community. But, the point I was trying to make is that when big moments like that happen to us, they shake us. And for me, I didn't realize until having my mentee B a year ago and taking time off and really deep trying to figure out all the tethers, all the little strings that make me me. And I just saw Inside Out too. So I don't know if you've seen that yet, but watch it. And everybody go and watch it, and like mandatory watch it and then think about what you've done with your life. And so I really turned back to mindfulness, and I realized that I have a really strong practice of meditation that started when I was 18. And I went to that, my very first heartbreak. I was in a breakup and I wanted to understand the meaning of suffering. But from that started a really deep practice of meditation. And there was a minute where I belonged to a Sangha in Sonoma and practicing, but I left that actually because of sexual violence. Not that it was anything I experienced, but just the organization itself. And one of the primary teachers, shocking, was involved in something. And I don't want to be associated with that kind of stuff. So I found different teachers, but just having that practice of reflection and being able to look at yourself differently. I'm having anger. I'm having joy. I'm having compassion. I'm having empathy. I'm having sadness instead of I am angry. I am sad. I had to really work on that. And that's helped me be able to see my victimization differently, how I want to be in the world, just that little buffer and barrier. So I just want to offer that if that's useful to anyone.
Very, I love that. Yeah. Holy cow. I'm having all the big feelings about it. I'm sure others will too. It's the I'm having it, and which is a far different perspective than I am.
Yeah,
or it really having
is.
Me. And I've realized in a lot of these situations, in some fractured relationships that I've had very recently, thinking that I'm not responsible, I haven't played a role in it or whatever, which is complete BS, because we should always be asking ourselves, what are the conditions that are allowing this to exist and what is my role in it? So when you ask yourself those questions, you realize like, okay, maybe I was a butthead. You get to a place where things just shift. That's where you're meeting me right now. I'm in this place of like fluidity. I feel like you all probably have your favorite like drink or mocktail. And I'm thinking of my mom who once like fell off of a dock holding a beer, and like she fell in the water and went down. And the only thing that stayed above water was her beer. The precious liquid. So I think of myself as the precious liquid, but I've been kind of just like poured out of the bottle. There's been no real container, and I haven't really been embracing what that fluidity has meant in my life. I think I've been trying to listen to people that raised me or my society or whatever, and like, oh, you need to be like this, or you need to fit inside this kind of a bottle or whatever. And so you're meeting me at a place where I've broken out of the bottle and I'm just all over the place.
I love these analogies that you're pulling together. It's so important, I think, to make note of what you just said is these tiny little changes in the way you say things and the way you view things can have such a huge impact. It's like a pilot. I use this because I have a love for flying. So if you're on a compass heading, you see the end where you want to be on the map, and you have to hold that compass heading. But if you go off just 1 degree, it can take you in a completely different place. Totally. I mean, the longer you're off that 1 degree, the further away you are from your destination. But I think in this case, it's a great example of that's what we need. We need to get off of our stuck place of using old analogies and old wording and old thought processes and get to the point where you're re-examining everything and reassigning meaning to your life by that meditation, by those thought processes, by saying what you just said. Instead of I'm feeling, or I'm being something that will change me. I love that.
Yeah, I didn't create this. This is therapy and things I've learned from, this is just,
I get that.
Okay.
I just love that you've pointed it out because it's so important.
Can I just say, I really like that analogy you're using of flying. It reminded me of when I was mountain biking. I used to do downhill mountain biking. And when you're training and learning how to mountain bike or like do slalom and trails, they teach you to focus where you want to go. Because if you focus on the obstacles, if you focus on the logs, it's like you have to look beyond the log. Because if you're looking at that log, your front tire is going to hit that log. Mm-hmm. And so that's also where sports is kind of intersecting and integrating into where I'm at right now too. Because just leaning into who I've been, and sports and athletics and training and practice, really practice. Everything is just practice. I'm practicing how to walk. You've probably seen these really weird walking meditation things that I learned when I was in the Sangha in Sonoma. What does it mean to walk and slow down and really feel things? And then those things I've been able to carry into like, wow, I'm in this meeting what does this meeting feel like? What is that energy that I'm getting? What is like slowing down so much? I can get below all the fucking bullshit. And there's just so much bullshit and fuckery in the world that you get frustrated about. The anger and frustration that you were expressing before, Carolyn, I can relate to that so much from the survivor perspective, or just right now being an LGBTQ person or somebody living and coming out as non-binary. It is really, really, really infuriating, some of the things that are going on. And I've also spent some time, like I think the last time we talked, I was just getting out of working in the victim services. I was also talking about some of the things that I was reflecting on there. And I found a community of people kind of like me who are really speaking some truth to some of the BS and things that are happening within some of our victim serving organizations, particularly to people of color, particularly led by white privileged leadership. You all know what's happening with RAIN and all of that stuff. We've got some big problems in this sector that we're also, not talking about. And so it's been really fun to find a place where I can be angry about the harm that I'm seeing. And I'm not talking about specifically in my community. I'm talking about organizations that I'm connected to outside of the state, but also I am connected to people that have been harmed by national organizations in this state. There's some big things that we need to uncover. And I find that I'm kind of unpopular in some rooms, that my voice is too much for some people. And I'm at a place now, I'm approaching midlife, the 40s, I don't give a F, kind of is what I've told is what this era feels like. And so I'm definitely leaning into that. I just want to say, for anybody that's in that work and isn't feeling supported by their leadership, speak up. You are the change. You have a voice. And the more that you and your colleagues rally together and speak truth to some of the BS that's happening, that's how change happens. And I've seen people do it. So there you go.
Wow.
And I think it's inherent, Bailie. You're so right. I have a mentor. Her name is Rita Smith. She was the president of the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence for decades. She's now the NFL liaison related to domestic violence, trying to create change in major sports. She's more in a retired state, but does contract work. Yeah. And when I asked Rita to be my mentor, it was for two reasons. First reason, she had to help me remove the word fuck out of my vocabulary because I can't be in really powerful rooms making smart decisions if I get angry and drop the F-bomb all the time. And the second thing was to help me learn how to dodge quicker the slings and arrows of fellow advocates, because there's such a steep, ingrained, this is how we do the things, which if we haven't, within just related to domestic violence, if we haven't lowered the homicide rate of people killed at the hands of someone who claims to love them in 40 years, then it's time we shook some things up. So people are against each other. People don't want to collaborate. And so in deciding to build Safe in Harm's Way, it was going to be based on collaboration. Again, back to my dad's DNA. We have to create change. We have to, in our organizations, have the hopeful confidence to raise your hand and say, we could do things differently. So as Safe in Harm's Way is rebranding, we're still in that process. I've begun a defined advocate lane where advocates can go online at Safe in Harm's Way and find the tools and resources they need to teach them how to use their voice in their own organization, to teach them how to take better care of themselves, to teach them empathy, because I see people who've done this for a long time become so jaded that they don't believe the stories they get. Yeah. And I hear those stories from people. I see the consequence. And this isn't something new. I was talking to a woman this week. She's 65 years old. And when she finally left her husband after 46 years, and he had done some horrific things to paint her as the bad guy, and she went to an advocate, and that advocate said to her, "You're exactly the kind of person we work against. We're not helping you." Didn't believe anything she said. Advocates get to that point when they're dealing with sexual assault survivors. We have to acknowledge that sane nurses face an incredible amount of tragic events and work people through at their lowest points. And if we don't start serving them well and offering continuing education around trauma-informed care and empathy, we're going to have nurses going, that story just doesn't make sense.
Oh my gosh, so true.
Yeah, can I just also interject? But also it's leadership, though. These practices, it's a cultural practice. And if you work in a place that doesn't value employees enough to give them the therapy they need to do their job, And I'm saying that coming from a place of privilege because I'm working at an organization on the Move Bay area that does that. I have clinical with my team with the therapist, and then I have availability to meet with someone one. Actually, right after we get off of this, I'm having a 45-minute breath work session. I can't wait. It's like taking a hero dose of mushrooms, but I don't get high like after this. And it's so cool working in a place where I'm actually healing because I'm being challenged in the work, because I'm a person, kind of like where I was at before. I was a survivor, even though I was really not dealing with where I was at, and being a victim services advocate, which won't recommend that if you're not totally healed. Thank you very much, people. But it's happening again. I'm a person who is LGBTQ. I also work for an LGBTQ organization, and I'm deeply embedded in our LGBTQ community. So it never turns off. It's like healing in all of the ick that comes, all of the, the anti-LGBTQ stuff. Like we face some of that stuff here in our community with our emblems of our agency being vandalized with giant red swastikas on the welcome sign. Not very welcoming in the world-class Napa Valley. But that stuff is a learning experience, because in that experience, I got to work with our local law enforcement, which, hey, there's historical tensions between LGBTQ community and law enforcement. Let's talk about that collaboration that happened. They actually hung up cameras so much that the person, less than 24 hours after we hung the cameras up, the person vandalized again, and it led to an arrest. And it led to the person basically admitting that they did it because they didn't like the LGBTQ community, which elevated it to a felony, vandalism. So it's like I get to see and experience all of that from a position of where I'm at in the community, as holding the space of I'm me living my life, being joyful Bailie. And I get to hold the ick and the hard stuff too. And I'm totally here for it. Real recent experience. I was at the farmer's market 3 weeks ago, right after receiving the Pride Proclamation from the Napa County Board of Supervisors. It was beautiful. They gave me 4 minutes to speak, and I basically gave them a rundown of this is the state of LGBTQ in Napa County. I felt so empowered. I felt so loved and held. And then I went to the farmer's market, and I was standing by the rainbow flag that my wife hung up because she's the Napa Farmers Market executive director, and they celebrate Pride Month, and they put the flag up because it's an inclusive space where everyone belongs. And a person walks up and starts giving a volunteer a hard time about the flag, and basically, why can't I have my straight flag here? And why do you have to have a whole month? The person left and then came back, and the exchange heated, and it ended with me basically yelling in an elevated voice, "What you don't understand, sir, is 47% of the LGBTQ students in our school district have self-identified that they want to die by suicide. That's because of the hate that you bring." There you go. That's it right there. I'm a person that can stand there and say that and hold that and then fall apart afterward because, oh my gosh, there it is, homophobia in my county, in my community, in my wife's place of business, in Napa County in 2024. And I know that people like probably in leadership really hate it when I talk about this and I speak truth about what is really happening in our community, because we're a world-class destination in tourism and all of that. But also our community needs to know who we can trust. Our community needs to know who we can go to. It's really cool to be in this moment. And I'm happy that you two get to witness it and that we're like capturing it and documenting it right now with my rambles about my Vida Loca.
In talking about the ideas like this, whether it's how people feel in their community, it's people's awareness. If we can keep driving that, and we can keep using our voice to create the change, then we do create the change. Maybe not with the one that is raising the biggest ruckus, but anybody who overhears us, anyone who's standing in the vicinity and witnesses it. If we can talk about statistics and bring that home, what does this mean to you? So while somebody might not identify as LGBTQ or is even a version of some kind of homophobia in there, when you talk about young people wanting to kill themselves because of someone else's hate, well, then you do resonate with parents, hopefully, who've lost their children. You do resonate with people who don't identify as that, but can have the empathetic feelings. And if you don't, well, then you've really started to identify the assholes, which is also really helpful. All of it is helpful, even in the good and the bad and the ugly part of it. And we have to keep using the voices to share those statistics and stories to drive the empathy to create the change, because I do believe in that possibility. And it all comes back to the way that we normalize violence and the acceptance of that. So when we speak up against it, then we start to create those tiny moments of change.
Absolutely.
I'm thinking about the LGBTQ community and the intersection of us in receiving victim services, what it means for someone from our community to call the police for a domestic violence case. Let's just talk about the most marginalized here. For a Black transgender person to receive services from a rape crisis center, how confident are we in our country that the rape crisis centers actually know what to do in that moment and that person would receive respectful, equitable, fair services? I'm in the community all over Northern California doing best practices LGBTQ training. I'm not saying this to shame any agency, anybody, but every single person, every single agency, every single department. If you are not doing a refresher of LGBTQ best practices, what it means to work with this community, to truly work, to overcome your bullshit and biases, to actually see the person in all of their beautiful intersectional identities sitting in front of you and have empathy and have love and be able to actually allocate the resources that they deserve as a human being with human rights to that person. And that is my big fear right now, that is not happening for my community. There's an agency in a county over that has been in trouble by not fulfilling their state grant requirements and stuff. I wish that really more entities would look into how services are being executed at local DV and domestic violence agencies. When it comes to mostly marginalized people, I know that a lot of them tout that that's who they serve, but marginalized people aren't just from one demographic that happens to be the majority marginalized community in a community. There are so many layers of marginalized people within a community. And if we're not looking out for all of them, we are not doing our jobs.
Exactly. Exactly.
And the conversation I had with you, Carolyn, was so healing because you sat across the table and we talked about anti-racism and we talked about the bullshit of DEIB and some of this Jedi stuff. We talked about what it means to be showing up as white individuals in this work, all of the trans exclusionary stuff that's happening with feminism and all of that. All it's doing is making LGBTQ people not want to receive services, and then we don't get help. And so I really appreciate that you want to make this known, because I do too. We all need to be doing better. And if we're a leader in a community, we need to be taking care of the people on the margins and just be centering them. And that's not my idea. This is Black feminist theology here, bell hooks and Audre Lorde and all of that that's influencing my voice right now. And that's also my UC Santa Cruz Women's Feminist Studies education. Thank you very much, Bettina Apteker and Angela Davis. I feel it. I feel it every single day when I go to work, when I sit with someone across from me, or when I'm sitting with the youth and they're telling me the absolute fuckery and shit that their counselors and that their teachers are saying to them that makes them want to harm themselves. At what point is this just going to stop? When are we just going to stop hurting each other? The gay people and the Black people and the brown people, our children in other countries. Really, I'm going to stop now.
I was on a podcast recently and I talked about, I am somebody who went to 12 years of Catholic education, don't subscribe anymore to that religion or to a God. I have a creator image that I work within. My favorite parts of growing up, though, in Catholicism were the stories of Jesus, because he hung out with everybody. He hung out with the people nobody wanted to hang out with. He brought together all different kinds of people. Granted, the stories are only all different kinds of men, but he brought all different kinds of men together and said, come hang out with me and let's go stir things up and create change. As a little girl, that's what made me so excited about the possibility of religion. Mm-hmm. And what has been done to religion at the hands of men is abhorrent. It is no longer reflective of anything. As a little girl who was indoctrinated with mass every morning and religion as a subject taught in school for 12 years, it's infuriating to me. That takes like people who want to do good in the world from a religious space. Also now not acknowledging all the nuances of what you talked about, Bailie. It's one of the things that we're working on at Safe in Harm's Way is honoring and saying to the fact, we know there's an outage here. I don't have the solutions yet, but let's talk about the outage. Let's talk about different ways we can give resources for people who are brown, who are Black, who are identify as queer to call differently than the police, because that's too scary as well. And if we don't talk about it, I come from also a family of police officers. I'm not disparaging the people, but I also know statistically close to over 50% of the police population are also abusers. I also know that we have historically even more criminalized and marginalized people who look different than someone who wears the badge. And I'm not saying that every person who carries that badge is this way, but if we don't acknowledge the fact that it is, then we can't create change. And so I'm not getting into discussions anymore with the yeah, but not everybody. I don't care that it's not everybody. It is a good chunk of people. And if you can't acknowledge that it's a good chunk of people, then you are part of the problem. And so where do we align as friends? Where do we align in a community of people I have to work with? Because if we're not acknowledging all that, we're not fixing it. And we are not doing what I would hope at somebody's core base of why they got into services or why they wanted to make a difference in the world as a police officer is actually then doing it. Mm-hmm. And isn't that a shame that someone entered into an entity to do good in the world, and because the refusal to acknowledge of what needs to change in that is no longer doing the good in the world?
Yeah, but that could be said not just to police officers. I know nonprofit leaders in that position that need to just retire.
Agreed.
I don't know why you're hanging on. The 80s are over. Let the young leadership use their innovative ideas and get out of the fucking way.
Yeah, exactly.
Because not getting out of the way, it's causing harm, because all it is perpetuating the same cycles and all this stuff. It takes a lot of work. And I've learned this from someone in my circle right now. She's my associate director, Amber Twitchell. Hey, I love you. She's my coach, always just making me think about how am I showing up in situations and the impact that I might be having on another person, and how you cannot be a limited human being and be in a leadership position, because when you are, those limitations that you haven't worked on within yourself are going to play out on the staff around you. And then that plays into the systems of your organization and the way that things are done and decisions are made. And that's how harm happens. I think that's happening a lot in the nonprofit sector. I'm just going to say it.
It is. It's definitely is. If we can't even get along with each other, how are we going to create change that's positively impacting the lives we're meant to serve? That is a really big part of the equation. I was at a conference. I did it as a volunteer, and the people within this organization were horrific to each other, and they were unkind to the people who attended, which are fellow advocates, fellow service people. Insane. And so by the end of the fourth day, I was standing and talking with three of them. One left, and the other two started to disparage the person who left. Finally, after I'm observing, talking about looking at what you're doing in the world and how am I receiving this and what's the vibe, and the other person walked away and they started to talk about her. And I said, oh, I see what your culture is. And they said, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, I've watched you for 4 days. It doesn't matter what group of 3 or 4 are here. If one of you walks away, the remaining people start talking trash about the person who just walked away. And they were like, oh, I was like, yeah, it's kind of unfortunate that's your culture, right? They're not inviting me back. I ain't getting a volunteer. I might as well go down in flames. I said, you know what? I didn't really like this when I was a 7th grade girl, and I don't like it now at 52. So if this is who you are, I don't want to be a part of it. And you shouldn't really be a part of it either. I can't tolerate it. And so we're talking about this, and we grow and we evolved. We started this conversation in our own healing. As advocates, we've got to recognize not only ourselves, it has to be a constant self-reflection. It has to be hearing the feedback of fellow advocates. It has to be able to have the confidence and courage to say, check my head, because this is what's coming out of my mouth. It has to be our fellow advocates. And then we got to talk about our own family and friends, because as we grow, we're going to start to see things in the people who have historically surrounded us that aren't tolerable any longer. I had somebody ask me in relation to red flags and relationships, when do you ever stop walking away? I said, never, because you won't have to walk away from the people. Don't give off the red flag. And by the way, when you walk away from the people and the red flags, the best people come and take their place, because you've started to discern who's worthy to be around you, whether it's personal, whether it's a lover, whether it's professional, who deserves your time and quality and who doesn't. And that starts to become more and more apparent more quickly.
Through all of listening to both sides of your perspective, Carolyn, and your perspective, Bailie, to me, what it all boils down to is 2 words: love and respect. If we could just do that, the world would change. We wouldn't have to walk away from anybody if everybody could just learn to love and respect. I think about what you were saying, Bailie. Oh my gosh, the struggles you must live with in terms of working with organizations who are being led by people who are causing harm. Where's the love in that? Where's the respect? Here's what I want both of you to do. I want you to take this episode once I air it and send it to everybody you can think of, because they need to hear both of your voices.
This is also reminding me of something that's actually kind of personal, that's off topic, but also very relatable. I'm going through a transition of my gender identity and realizing that I am coming out as not cisgender. I am not cisgender, everyone. And I'm the last one to figure that out or realize that, which is kind of funny. One of our program coordinators was joking about how people that are non-binary or trans can clock each other or whatever. And it's, I don't know, maybe one of those things I haven't been wanting to really realize or notice because of my own internalized transphobia and homophobia and things that, I'm going through. But as I'm talking to people about what I'm processing right now about myself and what I'm realizing about myself, and I'm talking about this person that I think I've always been, there's people in my life that are actually questioning me or telling me, oh, well, just because you work in this job doesn't mean you have to change yourself. And I love these people dearly. And when they hear this, they're going to be like, oh, damn, I didn't mean to say that. Feelings hurt, not hurt, whatever. But it made me really think about that's the coming out process. People accepting you or rejecting you. The San Francisco Family Acceptance Project did long-time studies, and they're continuing to do their studies to prove the very basic fact that if you respect, love, affirm people, it's going to equal healthy outcomes. And if you blame, shame, reject, harm, push away for whatever reason, most of the time when people do that, it's because of their own stuff. It is anything that we're doing. It's just that process, and it's beautiful and it's messy, and I'm happy that I'm going through. I'm happy that you all get to witness that too.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing with us. That's really important for people to understand the ability to constantly evolve. Once you know better, do better. Once you learn about the dynamics and you learn how that relates to you, it's the epiphany of, oh, wait a minute, that's me. You have the right to change that. I've had people say to me, well, you just look at the world that way because of the work you do. Yes, it's true. And guess what? You could too. You could actually look at the dynamics and the statistics and actually get a little bit more invested because you've learned more. That's why this whole anti-woke culture, so you want to be still thinking the earth is flat? Is that where you're living? Your refusal to acknowledge change and evolution and creation? Okay, that's where we're going. Which are you buying into and which are you not? We have to always have these evolutions of thought and processes and keep learning more. And we have to do it. To your point, Dave, I love the whole love and respect. If we led with that, we just want to be heard. I contributed to an anthology book. It was just released last week. And my whole chapter is Healing Out Loud. And in it, I offer 15 different ways that you can show up for somebody, all the different boundaries. If what they experience is a little too close to home, you can say this. If you don't know what to say, a funny meme works. We just have to create ways to interact with people that are loving and respectful, even if we don't know, identify, or quite understand the journey they're on. It's not ours to understand. It's ours to love and say, I'm here for you. I might not get it, but here's what I know. And I'm going to be willing to do the work to find out. And how can I help you more? Yeah. That's just being a good human. That's being the Jesus I know from like the fourth grade girl.
I connect with that, not only from my past. I want to draw another connection. And that is, yes, there's got to be that leading with love and respect. But then, Bailie, you hit the nail on the head. That has to be backed up with affirmation. You can't just say it. You've got to affirm it in your actions, in the way you treat them. And that's what I so admire about both of you, is how you're doing the affirmation part of that.
Thank you. I hope we're doing you proud in the evolution of this podcast. I don't know if you had a certain criteria you wanted to hit of topics of discussion, but I feel like we've covered some good stuff.
Oh, so much so. When I think back to what I wanted when I started this podcast, it was a platform that felt safe and open to anyone to tell their story of being sexually assaulted or raped, but also as a platform for education. And so, yes, obviously, this whole episode is about being educated, being brought up to speed, being so aware of what changes need to be made in this culture. We've made some amazing strides. And Bailie, I think you've done some really good commentary on how you feel safe in your community now. 20 years ago, not so much, right? And
yeah.
so
I can give you an example. Can I give you an example?
Absolutely. I love it.
Yes. I moved to Napa in 2007. So your viewers might know or not know about my background. I'm a multi-potentialite. I've been successful at multiple different things and I've always followed my heart, and cooking was always one of those things. And so actually what got me to Napa was I was having too much fun in San Francisco and I was going to die having that lifestyle and that fun. So when my sous chef was on vacation, I bounced and got a job with Chef Jeremy Fox at his new restaurant, Ubuntu, and it was all vegetable inspired. It had a yoga studio on top. It was a decade ahead of its time, let's be real. So I was a tournant chef too, which is a really cool position where I've climbed the brigade. So the restaurant industry is very militaristic and there's, lower whatever. So I was a tournant, which is like right below becoming a sous chef. Like you learn, you're a rounds cook, basically. Like you learn all the different positions. You fill in when people are off and what's not. I was moving into that role, which was a step up for me. So I was loving it. I'm like, wow, I'm at the epicenter of food and culture. I'm in Napa. It smells like fermenting grapes in the air. Everything's beautiful. And I had this great apartment on 3rd and Franklin, downtown, and Community Projects, which is a lovely thrift store right across the street. Actually, the Community Projects, if you donate to them and tell them that you're donating on behalf of our local domestic violence organization, they actually cut them a check at the end of the year. It's really cool what they do.
Oh,
so anyway, I'm like all excited. I need to furnish my new studio apartment, living by myself, my own apartment for the first time ever. And I'm in the crosswalk and I'm walking across the street, and this giant white pickup truck blows through the crosswalk, doesn't stop for me, and yells faggot right out the window. I had just moved from the Castro in San Francisco, like legit. I was living for 4 years, the gayest place on earth, having the most fun. I mean, I'm legit looking through pictures right now and I'm like, why did I ever leave San Francisco? But I know why. So I remember in that moment, I actually like looked behind me to see who these people were talking about. And I realized, oh my gosh, it's me. I'm the only person here. And where the heck did I move to? And so to be 17 years later at the epicenter of Napa Pride 2024, we've launched the Queer Leaders Coalition, and we're like the grassroots of grassroots coalitions in Napa. And we're just getting people that we're all about like LGBTQ empowerment, realness, and linking people in the community that just want to either be around other LGBTQ people or allies that want to help us, and create opportunities for that to be exercised in the community through events and stuff or advocacy projects and whatnot. So we started with Pride. Let's organize Pride. We went from starting the month having like, I think we started June with 22 events. And right now, I think we're close to 50. And it's the community showing up. It's the community being, hey, this is a pivotal time in our history when we need to be showing people where we stand on this issue. And it's very clear. And I don't want to be like, it's very clear, like you're with us or you're against us, but sometimes it feels like that, the way that people treat us. Like I legit posted a picture of myself, a selfie promoting a Black trans artist in Philadelphia. And it said, I'm rooting for everybody Black and trans. I realized on my Instagram and on my Facebook page, I lost followers after I posted that. And I'm thank you. The people canceled themselves from my page. That's awesome. I don't need homophobes and transphobes and people that are anti-Black and racist like following me. Or maybe, they follow me because they want to see the awesome stuff that we're doing. And I have a private account too, which, it's really noticeable. But it's just, wow, in 2024, at the time when we've reached so much progress in LGBTQ rights in a lot of ways, we're also seeing the pushback. We're also seeing, the anti-LGBTQ legislation across the state, the gender affirming care, all that stuff. I feel so grateful that I live in California, where if I'm considering something medical in a transition, I'm in a state that I know that I can actually access that. And there are siblings of mine in states that have to either flee or they just can't. That's the world we're living in right now. And who do we want to be in this moment? And I'm really grateful that you two are incredible allies and supporters of me and my voice. And you've given me this platform to basically be vulnerable and myself to say what needs to be said for this issue specifically. So thank you.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure. And Dave, thanks to you for bringing us together. Thanks for the work you do with giving survivors a voice. And I think the more we have conversations, the more people in their own time can choose to speak as they want. And just the knowledge that they have the opportunity within a platform to do so is massively healing. It's all in the evolution of healing. So what you're doing with people and their different stories, and the fact that you bring men and women and every identifying
Fabulously
kind
gay
of person.
people like
Yes,
Exactly.
absolutely.
Like everybody, right? You're showing
Yeah.
all the people represented. That speaks volumes to who you are and what you're trying to do with this, because then it is telling in big ways, but in tiny moments, that everyone is welcome to share their experience in this and find the healing that they deserve, because it's a safe space.
Absolutely.
And when we can do that across the board, no matter how somebody identifies, we enable that healing to happen, even if they never want to share their story on this. They just know it's possible.
Yeah. Well, thank you for saying all those beautifully affirming things for me and for this podcast, because it's true. And it's the goal of what SAS is all about. And it's people like you who are doing what you're doing with Safe in Harm's Way that enabled you to meet Bailie, and then introduced me to Bailie. You told me you've got to talk to this woman. And that phone call that I just alluded to a little while ago.
You need to talk to this person.
Oh my God. Yeah.
That's okay. It's an adjustment, right? We gotta be training our minds. It's okay. That's what I'm here for.
And I think she was alluding to how powerful you are and how effective you are and how important you are. And I heard that 5 minutes into our conversation. And I'm like, yes, you have to be on my podcast. And I'm so grateful that you are, and both of you are, and that you agreed to this dual appearance on this episode. You both are so powerful. It's just amazing to me to have this opportunity. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you both.
Thank you.
And my hope and desire for both of you is that whatever your goals are, whatever way you're coming out, is exactly what you want it to be, and that it's harm-free. I really pray and hope that for both of you, for your organizations, for you as individuals. And thank you for sharing so much, all that you've shared in this short hour. Wow. Time flies when you're having a great time. Dang.
I know.
This has been amazing.
I love that we've been able to come together, to be able to be together all together and have great conversations. It's just soul fuel. It's just the realization that these kinds of conversations are what we need as advocates to create change and to keep us in that change mode. So I appreciate it greatly. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, I think I'll just close. If anybody wants to keep up with the work that I'm doing, at Coach Bailie Napa is my personal handle. At Queer Leaders Coalition is the Napa Queer Leaders Coalition, the kind of the activism work that we're doing here. And then at LGBTQ Napa is the LGBTQ Connection organization that I work for, and it's doing beautiful work. And if you really wanted to support the work that's happening in Napa, you can go to our website, www.lgbtqconnection.org, and make a donation. Throw some dollars at LGBTQ people this month. Being joyful, queer joy saves lives. That's my little tagline. And if you want a t-shirt like that, you can go to my personal clothing line, myangryt-shirt.com.
Yes. So good. Great plug.
And we'll have to do this again, because I'm being awarded the 2024 Altruist of the Year award by Markham Vineyards, which is really cool. They're making a great donation to LGBTQ Connection. I'm doing a 2-hour interview on July 1st, which is really cool.
I love it.
That is saying something right there. Wow.
Yeah. So there's a lot. And if people want to see what's happening, Pride-wise in Napa County, www.napapride.com has everything. And we're actually taking Pride year round. Like, it's not just going to be the month of June. There are enough queer people and interest in creating queer community to take things year round. So that's what we're doing this year.
Love it.
And Carolyn, you hit the nail on the head too with something you said, and that is that we've got to talk about this more. And that's the other aspect of this podcast that I am really proud of, is that I am providing a place for people like both of you and so many others who've been on this show to talk about their experience, to tell their story, to share their professional opinions and education in this realm of all that this is: rape, sexual assault on the LGBTQ community. We've got to do what we can to start loving and respecting, and then applying that and making it something that
we can point at and say, this is what I am doing to try and help this situation.
Awesome.
It is.
Thank you.
Thank you both so very much for being with me. You've been amazing. This has been a true joy. This episode's going to be awesome.
It is.
I agree.
Can't wait to hear it.
Yeah. Well,
I love to hear myself on a soapbox.
there you go.
That does it for another episode of Sexual Assault Survivor Stories, the SAS podcast. My heartfelt thanks go out to both Bailie and Carolyn for their open and transparent thoughts and experiences during this amazing episode. I hope all of you listening got as much out of this as I did. And if you want even more insights, power, and awesome content, pick any of the other episodes on this show and give a listen. And if you haven't already, please rate and subscribe to Sexual Assault Survivor Stories, and then be sure to share this show with everyone you know. You'll be doing your part to help bring justice to victims and survivors of rape and sexual assault. Another way to do this is to start by believing when you're listening to or supporting a victim or survivor, because we all know someone whose life has been impacted by rape or sexual assault. Please tune in again next week for another episode of Sexual Assault Survivor Stories, the SAS podcast. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.